Okay, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. We're here at Local 24 Insulators, and thank you all for hosting us and for the great tour beforehand. We have a really packed agenda today. There's a lot of meaty stuff to get through. We've got IRCs for the upcoming school year. We've got the expanded career counseling best practices report to review, and we've got our annual report to review and approve. So don't get mad at me, but I'm gonna make us march through this as efficiently as we can, so we make sure we get everything that we need to. Before we get started, Catherine, can you take roll and let us know that just confirm we have a quorum? Okay. Yes, we are good to go. Okay, we've got a quorum. Okay, so our first consent agenda item is to approve the minutes drafted from the December 3rd meeting and the agenda for today's meeting that was provided to all committee members in advance. Did anyone see any issues? Could be. Thank you. Thank you. I've got a motion in a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. The minutes agenda are approved. So we're going to jump right into it with our industry recognized credential, go through the process and the approvals that are being recommended. So I'll turn that over to, I believe, Molly, Tracy, and Pam are going to be walking us through this. You guys take it away.
Thanks so much, Myra. Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm not there in person. Molly Mesnard, Senior Advisor to the CTE Committee. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, great.
Yep, we got you.
All right, so I'm just going to take a minute of introduction just to kind of ground us in, where this all began, and then I'll turn it over to Pam and Tracy. So as you all remember, a little over a year ago, we issued our industry recognized credential policy. And really the purpose and intent of that policy was to define credentials that are truly valued by employers and aligned to workforce needs to really set the students up for success. This policy here really reflects that through, it's very clear and concise definition of a credential and ensuring that credentials, they must meet 7 required criteria in order to be approved and counted towards the Blueprint's 45% goal. So the rigor within this policy really ensures that, these credentials are validated by industry, they've got documented outcomes, they're showing up in job descriptions, employers recognize them, and they're aligned with in-demand occupations throughout Maryland. So throughout this work, we've been partnering very closely with the Maryland State Department of Education so that there's really just one list of state-approved credentials, that applies to both the Blueprint's 45% goal, but also for CTE programming and Perkins funding needs. So a year ago, the prior state approved list of credentials also included, something called like technical skills assessments and so forth. And so the prior state approved list probably had something like 600 approved credentials. So, with the passing of this policy, we honed that list down to those credentials that really met the 7 required criteria, and then also opened up applications for new credentials to be considered. So a year ago, you all approved those new credentials to be added to the state approved list. And at the end of all of that, there was about, I want to say about 210, but Tracy or Pam can correct me, 210 state approved credentials that really met the criteria and intent and purpose of this. So today before you really marks the second round of applications for new credentials to be considered. At the end of this presentation, there'll be time for discussion or questions, before you all decide to put before you whether to decide to approve the new credentials recommended for approval. One thing I'll just take a moment to really emphasize, and kind of ground ourselves within this work. Something that I know I always need to come back to is, you know, when we're reviewing applications and so forth, we do have to always remind ourselves that, you know, not every occupation and not every CTE program is going to necessarily have a credential that can be earned by a high school student. And really just want to emphasize that's okay. But when you tie a goal to something, naturally, you know, the feelings are trying to look for, you know, more opportunities to get closer to that goal. So, you know, I say all that to kind of just really kind of tie us back to the original intent and purpose here. Because a lot of the times there's going to be curriculum or even like micro credentials that could be still valuable to students and still might be appropriate to build into programming or so forth, but they might not meet that true definition of what is a really valued industry recognized credential. But again, that's okay. The 45% goal is not all students. And you know, with the CTE vision statement as well, that jointly issued statement from our last meeting, you know, we know that also a quarter of these, 1 in 4 of the 45% goal will need to be the high school level registered apprenticeship. So credentials is not the only way to meet the goal as well. So I just like to kind of take us there, and now I'll turn it over to Pam and Tracy from the Maryland State Department of Education to walk us through the process and findings from this review cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly, for that rich and thoughtful introduction. It feels so good to be with you guys this afternoon. Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you to the full committee for welcoming MSDE here, continuing this conversation, continuing to partner with us as we push forward to strengthen Maryland's CTE system. So as noted, I'm here with the illustrious Pamela Clay, who many of us know, and who continues to lead fearlessly our IRC work at the Department of Education. So we thought that we would kick off with a quick walkthrough of this year's review process, and then move into the recommendations for today's vote with a few exemplars, and then review briefly some new business rules to close us out. And I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Tracy. I would like to thank the CTE Committee for the opportunity to present the 2026 industry recognized credential recommendations. Our objectives for today are the following: review MSDE's implementation process for industry recognized credentials, preview IRC application data from cycle 2, and introduce decisions and business rules for cycle 3 beginning August 1st. As mentioned previously by Molly as well, the blueprint for Maryland's future requires the Government's Workforce Development Board CTE Committee to establish a statewide policy defining industry recognized credentials, determine which credentials count toward the 45% goal, and it require LEAs, community colleges, local workforce development boards, and other Maryland organizations to apply for approval for any credentials not on the approved list. To be recognized under the CTE Committee IRC policy, an industry recognized credential must meet all required core criteria and 2 optional criteria. They include the following: align with in-demand occupations, provide documented outcomes, validated by industry, assessment-based, standards-driven, attainable and accessible, portable, and 2 that are preferred but not required, stackable and renewable. The annual IRC approval process begins with applications opening in August and closing on October 31st. MSCE reviews submissions from October to November and then prepare recommendations in December and submits packages to the CTE for a formal vote in January. Approved credentials are published in February with the state-approved IRC list taking effect on July 1st of the upcoming school year. The CTE Committee's industry recognized credentials policy was approved by the Accountability and Implementation Board on August 1st, 2024. On August 1st, 2025, MSCE launched a new webpage and opened the IRC application, providing sample applications and guidance for applicants, including, which was new, a recommended artifacts document that outlines core criteria, required artifacts, and example submissions, On the website, it states that each applicant must submit at least one of the recommended artifacts for each criterion. If they look at the recommended artifacts, which they have a link, and some people also received a copy if they cannot open the link, they would see the core criteria listed and at least 5 artifacts that would be listed under that core criteria and an example of that artifact. And again, on the website, it states that each applicant must submit at least one of the recommended artifacts for each criterion. The industry recognized Credential Review Committee included representatives from multiple state agencies, such as the Maryland State Department of Education, which included committee members from the Division of College and Career Pathways, Comprehensive Art Education. Also from the Division of Special Ed and Maryland FFA. Then we have the Maryland Department of Commerce. We have the Maryland Higher Education Commission. And last but not least, we have the members from the Maryland Department of Labor and the Governor's Workforce Development Board. MSDE promptly contacted applicants with incomplete submissions, providing guidance, resources, and virtual support opportunities. All communications were documented to ensure transparency and accountability, contributing to the data presented in the committee's report, which would be found on pages 2 through 5. As you can see, we have a balanced application type submitted. This year, a total of 92 IRC applications were submitted, including 16 duplicates and 1 already state-approved credential, resulting in 75 new unique applications. And now Tracy Kittle will present the application data for cycle 2 and introduce the business rules implementation.
Thank you, Pam. So this year, every credential that is being recommended to the CTE committee demonstrates strong market currency, supported by high quality artifacts. So as Molly had noted, most notably, that includes current job postings that show that the credential is actively being used as a hiring qualifier. So just to review a couple examples, one standout example from this year is the Community Health Worker Certification, known as the CHW. It was submitted by Howard County. The application showed strong workforce alignment. The credential is accredited by the Maryland Department of Health. It is accessible through the Maryland One Stop portal, and is listed as a prerequisite in job postings across Carroll, Caroline, and Somerset counties. We also saw strong alignment in emergency communications. So the International Academies of Emergency Dispatch application, this was submitted with Charles County Public School. And this IRC reflects essentially the industry standard for emergency call taking and dispatch protocols, not just nationwide, but also internationally. And this credential was supported in artifacts by job postings across Prince George's, as well as Anne Arundel counties. And this included positions within police communications, along with a $5,000 hiring incentive that was tied to the training completion. Additional exemplars include a suite of ASE heavy truck and ICAR credentials, which is going to expand opportunities for our students beyond traditional auto mechanic pathways, but also into heavy truck and career and auto body as well. And then finally, the NASM certified personal trainer application demonstrated demand through live job postings at various YMCAs across the region, as well as Equinox and Vita Fitness facilities. And these, of course, have strong alignment to our kinesiology programs, but also emerging credential opportunities within our new physical education courses and pathways that we're particularly excited about. So taken together, the 22 recommendations that MSDE is sharing with the committee this year meet all 7 core criteria. They are supported not by just employer testimony, but also by current public job postings that explicitly require that the credential can lead to traceable wage boosting employment. So with these recommendations, we also just wanted to pause and to affirm all of our applicants this year. We saw a higher volume of fully completed applications than we saw last year,
which means that more submissions met all 7 of the required artifacts, and they had stronger evidence of regional and local collaboration. We know that Maryland loves a group project, so wanted to affirm everyone on that. And then as Pam noted, we saw a balanced mix of applicants. So submissions came from workforce boards, from LEAs, from nonprofits and government agencies. This has really signaled that the work is in fact scaling statewide. And then up next, we're going to talk through the IRCs that we're not recommending to the committee this year. As we do make this transition, the committee is going to notice that we do not have any recommendations with reservation this year. And so based on lessons learned from last year's cycle and what we hope was clear guidance provided upfront, the applications either fully met the criteria or it did not. And so that has allowed us to make more decisive recommendations moving ahead. With that said, I apologize. Yes, I'm so sorry. Thank you. No, with that said, MSDE is not recommending 47 of the 75 applications submitted this year to the committee. Those applications either did not fully meet the 7 core criteria, were incomplete, or were missing those key artifacts. But we did want to identify that throughout the review process, we worked really closely with applicants to dig deeper where we could, particularly around alignment with workforce or with post-secondary credit, and then to clarify evidence wherever we could find possible. This approach allowed us to recommend the highest quality of credentials that reflect both the rigor and the spirit of Blueprint. And this is a very friendly reminder that any applications that were not recommended this year are always welcome to reapply, resubmit, and revise in future cycles.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
So I think what I'm hearing you say, and I just want to confirm is, applicants applied, and if you felt there were deficiencies, you contact them about that. And if somebody said, oh, I have that documentation, here it is, you would take that in and consider that. And,
Yes.
And it also sounds like you guys are providing technical support to say like, these are the kinds of things we need, and you get. And so if someone could get that back to you in this cycle, they would be approved. If they can't, then either they need more time to go gather that information. So I just want to underscore that.
Also, the link for the recommended artifacts, if they could not open that link, I sent them a copy through email, so you received it to look at it.
Yeah, and the other thing I hear you guys saying that I just want to underscore, because my observation is that you are offering a lot of support for, so you don't have to wait till August to, if folks are starting to think about IRCs that they're going to want to put in. This office is there to support you thinking about what are the things we need to line up, what do we, so I just really appreciate all of the work that you do to support advocacy.
Thank you, and you summarized it perfectly. Appreciate you. Okay, areas of growth. Let's talk through some examples. So in several cases, applications were not recommended, again, because the submissions were incomplete. Even after those multiple outreach efforts to finalize the documentation that typically started in November. The most significant number of applications typically relied primarily or solely on employer testimony that was describing a perceived value or sort of this aspirational usefulness without actually providing evidence of market currency. So it didn't provide hiring preferences. It wasn't providing required qualifications or wage progressions that were tied to that credential. And then a number of submissions not recommended also were functioning as badges or completion awards or instructional enhancements. So that means that things like curriculum or instructional programs or software platforms or programming languages, tools, certificates of completing a course, those were not recommended as they did not represent independently validated, requalifying, wage boosting, industry grade credentials, even though we know that they do support the instruction of sort of this basic skill and knowledge. I would also add, Madam Chair, as you mentioned, these were very, very difficult decisions that required the MSDE IRC Review Committee and partners across the state who you saw
really grapple honestly with the system that we're building for young people. And so even though many of the applications did in fact reflect the spirit and the intent of the work, they weren't always meeting the rigor or the industry verification that was needed to ensure that the credential was leading to a K-12 building opportunity. So some of those, for example, we had 9 applications come through that were completion or end of course assessments. So from reps officiating to lead for change, Intuit's personal finance class, the job site leadership certification, the ROJTC employability skills test. These are some of those examples. And then uniquely programming languages and software platforms such as MATLAB. This is a platform that supports instruction in Java and C++ and Mathematica. Those were not recommended because while these tools are serving an important role in instructional and post-secondary coursework. So for example, the class we give at College Park does include this industry credential. The application didn't demonstrate that their credential, their programming language could actually function independently or hold value outside of a full bachelor's degree. So that was another example. And so just moving forward, as Molly noted, these are distinctions that are going to remain essential for these recommendations and to ensure that we are leaning into vendor neutral employer-backed certifications.
And the other thing I just want to say, which Molly said at the beginning, but I think it helps to underscore, is that no one on the IRC review committee is saying that the things that were not approved are bad things or that we shouldn't be doing them. That's not, I think it can be like natural to say, oh, they weren't approved because there can be valuable things that we are providing to students. They just don't meet this bar.
Yes.
And so it's not, no one is saying we shouldn't have MATLAB certification in this course or that, but we're really focused on what is gonna lead to better employment outcomes for us.
And some of the follow-up questions we've asked with that particular point is, for example, if a post-secondary institution is advocating for the value of a credential and they say, we teach this in our class. If it's so valuable that you teach it in your class, are you also willing to provide articulated credit for it, right? And so we've started to be able to ask these kinds of questions. So the committee may be able to hear those anecdotes in the future, or we've also been asking if it's a credential that we have a significant empowerment behind. We are also asking, do you have examples of the number of students within your county who have already earned this, right? So we're starting to ask for that type of evidence to also substantiate. I think we can actually move ahead and perfect. That was an excellent segue into deferred recommendations. So this is our final category. 6 recommendations were deferred this year. And again, while they do not meet all 7 IRC criteria, as the chair had just mentioned, we also want to signal that there are certain IRCs that have alignment with state priorities, right? And there is potential viability when there's additional technical assistance in labor market validation. So one of the examples that came up that was deferred is we received an application for a community interpreter credential. So we know that interpretation is a high need area, absolutely. But this specific credential submitted with its application materials lacked a national certifying body. And so we are really excited to work with our world languages community at MSDE and our partners in language services industries, so interpretation, translation, communications, to see if either we can find a credential that better meets labor market need or work again with the example that we got this year. So those are some examples. The SOCA Industry 4.0 credential aligns conceptually with automation and mechatronics pathways, also something to be excited about. But the application did not demonstrate sufficient employer demand through those job postings. So sometimes what we're finding is that applications are coming forward before industry is sort of at a place where it can give or not give a value to it. And so it's sort of in this like value agnostic space. And so part of the deferment is to, of course, the signal that we're excited about it, but also sort of put it on like this watch list in a way. The wilderness first aid application, also really excited about this credential. It shows a lot of promise and evidence for specific fields. So for example, CPR first aid is typically listed, as Molly had stated, as sort of a technical skill assessment. But when you're talking about wilderness first aid within the community, the natural resources community, when you are 6 hours out of being able to receive emergency help, it requires a different skill set than when you have emergency technicians nearby. And so there were these moments where we're actually going to return to this credential during business rules, because there's times when we need to work as a team here to identify, like, when in certain fields does it make sense for something to be a credential, and when may it not in other specific programs of study. And then the last example we'll provide is Tinkercad, Autodesk Tinkercad and Final Cut Pro. This is one of those unique fields where we want to work closer with our comprehensive arts community and team at MSDE. The credential did not technically meet the policy criteria because, again, the absence of an independent certifying body. But the arts also has a significant reliance on project-based assessments. And sometimes in the arts, there are software proficiency assessments, which is essentially what Final Cut Pro is, right? You use it. I'm sure your communications team uses it. Our communications team uses it. And so the application was strong, but we want to make sure we're being consistent in the application of the policy. And so that these credentials were deferred to just allow for that alignment to happen, both in like a data anatomy perspective, but then also within industry. So that concludes our recommendations and the examples for the year, moving ahead with 22 recommended, 47 not recommended, and 6 deferred. Great. This last bit here is working through implementation business rules. So last year, as a part of the cycle for the IRC process, there was a set of recommendations that we thought could inform future business rules. And originally they were framed as considerations, recognizing that adjustments would need to happen within the first 2 years. And so these slides here compile the proposed business rules to strengthen the application process moving forward. 2 of these recommendations here are sort of policy related, and 2 of them are administratively focused. So starting with the policy related business rules first, starting with a completedness review, and Myra, this gets back to some of what you mentioned earlier. In alignment with the policy, it states in November that MSDE reviews each submission for completeness and follows up with requesting entities when additional information is needed. So based on application patterns between cycle 1 and cycle 2, we also noted that a few applications were submitted with missing materials and then were sort of completed after October 31st. Mm-hmm. And so to promote the consistency and the fidelity of the policy, we are recommending that the follow-up requests are going to be limited to the applications in which the applicant has made a good faith effort to submit all those required documents by the 31st. And then the second connected to the policy is the recommendation for clearly identifying within each application specific courses, pathways, or programs of study to which an IRC aligns. Again, back to data anatomy and design. It's noted on page 15 of the IRC policy. We call it in the document, a program study crosswalk is intended to map IRCs to these state-approved programs. So we have started this somewhat on our website. We do have an effective date in which each IRC went into effect, but this is a part 2 for us as a team. The second 2 admins, we can make this quick, is just to clarify that future evaluations, we are seeking to reaffirm that curriculum, instructional programs, et cetera, that do not require any demonstration of skill are not considered an industry recognized credential. And then the last bullet, as well as the next page, refer to some language that we saw last year around the maintenance of the list. So we had mentioned last January that any time that we have an administrative change, a name is updated, we're cleaning up standards, something that's renamed. there wouldn't have to be anything brought to the committee. But when there is significant change requiring reevaluation, so the elimination of domains, there's a change in the testing environment, that would be wrong. Okay, as we close out this year's recommendations, we have a little bit more work to do, my friends. There are some notable actions that continue to remain underway. So first, it was encouraged for MSDE to strengthen the application process by taking, Pam had a wonderful screenshot of an artifact document that's accessible, actually embed that directly into the application. So there's something of like a built-in check for understanding, and folks aren't having to go to different places to see different examples of things. So appreciated that, and we're excited to refine that. Second, MSDE and the CTE Committee establishing clearer guidance around the IRC life cycle. So on page 14 of the policy, it speaks about MSDE and the CTE Committee conducting a comprehensive review every 2 years to ensure the relevance and the quality of the evolving industries. And so again, we are halfway there with those effective dates on our website, but this is a second piece for us to design. Third, for our local education agencies, we're excited to move into next school year, being able to give them greater clarity regarding the data infrastructure that is actually used to measure the high school attainment of an IRC. And so that speaks back to the importance of aligning them to programs of study and recognizing that when will they not apply to some programs, but not others. And then finally, this was already aforementioned, which is again, that alignment with just portfolio-based and performance-based assessments and working with our arts community a bit deeper. All right, we have arrived on our final slide. We made it. Thank you everyone for staying with us today. This concludes MSDE's recommendations for industry recognized credentials for cycle 2. I also wanted to thank all of our applicants for their dedication to continuing to build a competitive workforce in Maryland. So thank you. And then a brief reminder for any applicants that they will generously be contacted by Pamela Clay regarding final determinations in the next 10 to 14 days following the committee's vote. And then in the meantime, if the committee or the public have any questions, they can reach out using that contact information below. And so with that, I will yield back to the committee for questions.
Thank you. I want to open it up to committee members. Any questions about the recommended IRCs, the process, what we're thinking, what is being recommended here in terms of future business rules? What thoughts do you have?
I know, there were some concerns raised when we started down this road about like, will this process be rigorous? I think that was really helpful to see it has been, and we all recognize things on this list that were not approved, but I think trying to really hew to the criteria to say like, does it have the value add, does it meet these criteria that were, as a framework, it's helpful to see how it's playing out in the world, and I think it's really useful. It's good to have it. Am I right to recognize all the hard work? I'm sure it's a lot of care.
How are we feeling about, I totally agree with what you're saying, but looking at the justification, first of all, really appreciate very robust, evaluation and clear articulation of why something does or does not meet criteria and what would need to change. So I think that's really helpful for everyone involved. And I'm just open it up to committee members. I think our job is to say, okay, this is year 2 of this process. Do we feel like this process so far is working the way it should? Are we honoring our responsibilities under the blueprint? Love to hear people's thoughts about that.
I'd say well done. It's easy to read. It's easy to know what's in the chart.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks for that.
Someone who's not neck deep in industry recognized credentials, it all made sense.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented, the recommended, not recommended, and deferred applications by MSDE.
Thank you, Brian. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Matt. I think that was Matt who gave me a second. All in favor of approving list of industry recognized credentials for the 26-27 school year? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
You, any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
So is there a way, now that that's okay, that natural resources, wildlife, whatever that was, kind of cool. But if there's not enough jobs, I wonder if there's a way to like get the fire department, natural resources all working together and somehow get a, yeah, brain fart, a class that's not required.
Together, yeah.
Part of this is us.
You know, that like for going into the fire department, it's one class you take, but going into DNR is another, but going into this wildlife rescue, it's another,
Yes.
where almost all of the credential is probably similar, except for one or two classes, and if they could work together.
Some of the questions, it's an excellent idea. Some of the questions we'll be asking ourselves when we start to dive deeper into this is, do you or do we want to see an EMT class receiving less EMT certifications and more wilderness CPR, right? Because as a broad stroke, we've been saying CPR, first aid, the 10-hour class, whatever, at a B is not rigorous enough. So we just want to be consistent with our own business rules. And so it's identifying like the application is great and Maryland's Natural Resource Department is behind it, right? And so it's just being clear with us being strict to the rigor, but then also being fair within different industries where it applies. I think that's a great recommendation. Yes.
I mean, the building trades curriculum, there's 15 different trades that you
Yes.
come out of that, you can go in any one of those 15 trades.
Yes.
There, in other industries, there has to be something we can learn from the building trades and use it.
Yes.
Yes.
Follow up.
I don't know if this is a related question or not, so you'll tell me if I'm off base, but one of the things I was thinking is like, if you have so IRC needs to be aligned to a program of study, right? If we surface IRCs that really have value in the marketplace, and there is not currently a program of study that supports it, it feels like we should be looking at, do we need to either adjust an existing program of study so that it is more aligned, or create a new program of study or replace or whatever?
That's our partnership. That's what it's all about. Absolutely. Those both ways.
Yeah, I think for kind of some of the things coming out of this for the committee too. First, thank you again, by the way, to the whole team, especially MSDE team for all the hard work. I think it's a ton of work on your end, and really good work. I think from this conversation, it sounds like it'd be great to coordinate with your team just to make sure we understand how the committee can be helpful. If there's a couple very specific places where some additional, whether it's quick industry engagement or supporting you as you engage your existing PACs or groups that you're already engaging to advise in some of these programs of study. Would love to make sure we're collaborating there and bringing that back to the committee as needed, and maybe in our April meeting, also bringing back a little bit about the 2-year reassessment process too, just kind of how we're thinking about that design. Yeah, we can work together on that, of course, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anything else before we move on to topic 2?
Thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you. Okay, our next agenda item is a review of the expanded career counseling best practices report. Just as a reminder to everyone, in our last committee meeting, we approved the what we were sort of statutorily required to submit a career counseling best practices report that was essentially based on desk research. So reviewing all of the MOUs, looking at what's common across them, what's different, et cetera. But our colleagues at JFS then took that a step further and conducted a number of focus group, facilitated a number of focus groups to get more color on the ground in terms of, okay, how is this actually playing out? There's the MOU and what things say on paper and then what is the experience. So I want to turn it over to Shauna Payne and Shamira Bowens to talk us through.
Thank you, Myra. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shamira Bowens, the Senior Director of the CTE Committee team within the Governor's Workforce Development Board. Happy to be here with you today. Again, as Myra mentioned, we will be digging a little deeper into the expanded career counseling best practices report. This builds upon the best practices and MOUs report that was approved by the committee in November 2025. Again, JFF took it a step further and had held 69 focus groups, which includes almost all jurisdictions in the state of Maryland, as well as local LEA, local education LEAs or our school districts, as well as an expanded landscape analysis to really support the state and our local leaders and how we can continue to implement the career counseling to meet the requirements and demands of the blueprint. So I'm happy to introduce Shauna Payne with Jobs for the Future to walk us through some of the findings, and then we'll engage in a little discussion.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shamira. Thank you, Madam Chair and the CTE Committee for having us here to present once again. We are really thrilled to be able to share beyond what was in the written documents that we talked about in November and to be able to highlight the voices of the local implementation leaders and all the amazing work that they're doing on the ground. So this report really focuses on highlighting both their successes and how they're navigating the challenges of building a program from the ground up and the challenges that they are still experiencing and guidance that they share through those focus group sessions. Thank you. There we go. So this slide really just serves to ground us in understanding the ecosystem of the career counseling system across the state. So it's made up of our local education agencies, our community colleges, our local workforce development boards, all working in connection to support our students grades 6 through 12. And I think that that's important as we start to really think through the themes and the patterns that emerge, that this is a partnership across several different agencies coming together in support of meeting that goal for individualized career guidance for every student grades 6 through 12. And so with that, it comes the complexity around roles, data, and coordination. And you'll see that reflected in the data shared today. So at a high level summary, this report synthesizes local implementation and experiences and focuses in 3 areas. It highlights solutions that have broad adoption across the state. It surfaces widely experienced challenges that we're seeing across the board. And it connects those to the patterns that we discussed in November in the implementation summary analysis. The emphasis is on practical insights that are coming from the field itself, ways that they are partnering on the ground to actually implement the program. And the report offers specific guidance for both near and long-term actions that local and state level leaders can consider moving forward. So, the analysis rests on 2 main sources of data. One is the analysis that was shared in November, which is primarily a document review of the memorandum of understanding across the partners at the local level. There are annual reports that were submitted in 2025 and check-in meetings that they had with the AIB in the spring of last year. This report adds in, as Shamira said, those focus groups. So we talked to over 69 individuals across 11 focus groups across all 3 different stakeholders, including career counselors, community colleges, LEA staff, and local workforce development board. Couple of quick notes. Thank you. When we use the term jurisdiction in the report, we're using it to talk about a formally designated partnership. So those that are part of that MOU. We want to be mindful that not every partnership is a county, and so we want to be inclusive in our language as we are talking about it. We also want to state that this report is not an evaluation. It is a reflection on what is happening on the ground and how they are presenting their perspective and their experiences based on what is happening for them. It surfaces trends, patterns, and stakeholder recommendations that can guide policy and future practice. Also want to acknowledge that there is amazing work happening with MSDE relating to professional development this year, and this focus group is reflecting a snapshot in time that was at the beginning of the school year. It does not reflect those updated programs. This gives you a snapshot of who we talked to across those 69 people. one particular note, this number is not gonna add up to 69 because there are some people who were counted multiple times because they may work for agencies that serve several different counties. But it allows you to see across the board that we were able to touch on every region throughout the state. We were able to talk to someone in at least every county and across every type of stakeholder.
Right, just remind me, this like types of stakeholders you're talking about.
So the three that are part of
The counselors themselves, LEA, staff, local workforce.
and community colleges.
Community colleges. But not parents and.
Correct. Very good distinction. This gives you a high-level summary of what we will talk about in detail in the upcoming slides. So this summarizes the 4 solutions that elevated themselves to the top because they seem to have broader adoption across the state, and the 4 challenges that elevated themselves. They were not specific to one particular locale. So for the solutions, what we saw is tiered professional development starting to emerge as an option that is working well. Structured partner meetings, embedded career counselors, and we'll talk more about what embedded means, collaborative employer engagement. On the challenges side, data systems and accountability, partnership roles and clarity, staff turnover and onboarding, geographic and capacity constraints. So for those who were able to review the previous report, you'll see a lot of similarities across what the field is saying and what we saw in the document review. So let's dive in. We'll start with the solutions. So the first solution focuses on onboarding and tiered professional development specifically for the career counselors. This was widely adopted in various ways. In practice, it can look like an annual summer onboarding conference for both new and returning staff. It will often be combined with the professional development so that there is an annual program and model that is in place, not one and done. Those PD sessions are done with intentionality and they are a mix of technical content with things like data privacy and platform use, relational practice that includes student engagement, strategies, and classroom management. Importantly, they are tiered by role and experience. So a new counselor and a seasoned counselor are not getting the same thing over and over and over. It's not a one-size-fits-all training. This approach builds shared language and expectations across partners. It supports consistency amidst staff turnover, and it strengthens relationships among the schools, the workforce boards, and the colleges. Solution 2, regular structured local partner meetings. This is where you see the jurisdictions are really that are further along in implementation are starting to have standing biweekly or monthly meetings amongst those 3 partners. So the LEA, the Workforce Development Board, and the community college partner coming together. They're not ad hoc, they are intentional with clear agendas, shared facilitation, and named ownership of the responsibilities and decisions. The partners are building shared calendars, they have running note systems, and even subcommittees to help them keep the work moving forward. And when this is in place, you see a consistent forum that aligns roles, resolves operational issues more quickly, and helps to maintain progress during those transitional periods with staff. Solution 3, embedded career counselors. This was one that was very sensitive in using the language. We want to be really clear that we are not suggesting that this has to be the career counselor employed by the local education agency. What we were talking about is the importance of that career counselor being embedded in the student experience. And so regardless of who their employer is, if their role is to provide the individualized career guidance to the students, they must be a part of that student experience on a day-to-day basis. And so ensuring that that is happening. Even in those conversations, it was named that they were not saying that it needed to be hired, the person needed to be hired by the LEA. They saw a lot of value of having them hired by the local workforce board as well, because of the experience that they may be bringing, but they wanted to make sure that the barriers were not there in terms of getting them into the school. So in this situation, when they are fully embedded, you start to see that they're integrated into the daily school schedules and routines. They're not siloed. They participate in staff meetings and they're regularly collaborating with teachers. There's a clear referral and support pathway and access to relevant student data and resources so that they can tailor their guidance and meet that individualized requirement. The stakeholders, as I said, mentioned that this is not employer dependent. Can't emphasize that enough, given the conversations that arose from it. It's about structure and making sure that the counseling function is more effective. Solution 4. So this one really focuses on collaborative employer engagement and shared events. In the jurisdictions that are demonstrating this, local partners are co-planning employer-facing events. They might have career fairs, joint industry days, career takeovers. They have shared timelines, clear outreach leads, and a backbone partner that is managing employer lists on behalf of the partnership. This coordination reduces duplication and employer fatigue, which we know is often a real barrier when multiple agencies are contacting the same businesses for the same types of things. The net result is that more students gain access to work-based learning and industry exposure, and employer relationships are managed more strategically. We'll move into the challenges. So with this, there are a number of things that we are starting to see that are happening. Again, it's not specific to a locale. They may show up in slightly different ways, but they're impacting equitable implementation of the overall model. The things that they focused on related to data systems and accountability, partnership structure and role clarity, staff turnover and professional development, geographic and capacity concerns. So we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like and why those things matter. With data systems and accountability, partners are reporting that guidance on required metrics often arrives late and can shift over time, making it difficult to plan and build systems. Many stakeholders have limited access to timely student-level data, and data flows can be one way. So one partner is sharing, but they're not receiving data. Agencies are, this dynamic erodes trust between partners and forces them into manual workarounds, pulling counselors away from direct student support. It also makes it harder to monitor quality, demonstrate impact, and drive continuous improvement in career counseling services. Chapter 2 is around partnership structure and role clarity. Stakeholders describe overlapping or unclear duties across the three partners, so the LEAs, the workforce boards, and community colleges. There's often uncertainty about who holds decision-making authority, particularly when issues cut across institutional boundaries. One symptom is uncoordinated employer outreach. So while there's solutions, there's also a challenge there with engaging with the employers. The slow implementation, even when partners are committed, creates confusion for employers and can ultimately limit work-based learning opportunities for the students.
Can I ask a question on this? So thinking about the solutions, the things that are working well, it seems like there are two things that are married here between the solution and challenge. So one, what I heard in the solutions is that what's working well is those jurisdictions that have coordinated standing meetings with clear, set agendas and all of that. Like in those scenarios, do you see less of the decision rights problem happening?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm just, so that's one. And then I guess the second question is, the solution around having a backbone person or entity, like basically a point, who's gonna take point, employer outreach, it's kind of the same. Am I reading
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
The thing that's working well is actually probably the solution to the challenge that's happening when that isn't.
Absolutely, absolutely. The big thing across all of these that you're naming is coordination and building strong relationships, because one, we all know that builds trust. And then you build in a decision-making process so that you have a way to resolve conflict when it emerges, as opposed to everyone functioning in their individual silos. And then when you think about how that translates to employer engagement, if you're having a regular conversation about the events in your calendar and the things that you want to offer to your students, you're thinking about how you're doing that together and you're identifying who's reaching out to the employer instead of everyone kind of doing their own outreach.
Yeah, and then you're making one ask of the employer, hey, here's the variety of things we would like to do. What will work for you, as opposed to them getting 3 calls or 4 calls from 4 different people.
Absolutely. And you see progress moving a lot faster in those places. The third challenge is staff turnover, onboarding, and professional development. In at least 8 of the jurisdictions, they reported persistent turnover of career counselors, which disrupts relationships with students and school staff. Qualifications for the roles of career counselor vary widely, varying from associate's degree to licensed teachers or school counselors, creating inconsistency in preparation. Professional development ranges from ad hoc one-off workshops to robust credential-based models. depending on the jurisdiction. Inconsistent onboarding and professional development undermine both effectiveness and retention, which is why the solution that we talked about earlier with tiered PD and annual onboarding is so critical.
Got a question. Sorry. Jump in, but like, one, do you have any sense of what's driving that turnover? I mean, 8 jurisdictions, that's.
It's a lot, yeah. What we saw, so it goes a lot to the things that we're talking about with what the requirements are for hiring and aligning that with job expectations and aligning that with salary. And so
So
when
like
those,
people took the job, they thought it was gonna be one thing.
Exactly.
It's either not clear or was
Mhm.
something else, and they're like, this isn't what I thought it was.
absolutely. And then when you couple that with what we were just talking about earlier, where you don't have that coordination happening, so people are having to do a lot of manual workarounds, you get frustrated.
And then, I don't know if I'm about to ask like a taboo question, but I just honestly don't have the answer to this. Is there a notion of like a consistent job description? So for example, across the state, we hire teachers, is there like a statewide, like here's what has to be in your job descriptions kind of thing? I don't know the answer to that.
Right now, I'm not aware of that. I think it's definitely something that should be discussed. I know that they're also looking at updating the MOU template. And so as you think about updating that, there's opportunity for that discussion.
Yeah. Because it feels like if you had a consistent job description, one, that would help with clarity, it would help with being equitable across all the jurisdictions. And also would allow for more mobility if somebody wants to be from.
Absolutely. It also helps with professional development as well and creating career trajectories.
Yes, yeah, what's the career progression?
Absolutely. The last challenge was around geographic and capacity constraints. So with this, in some areas, you're seeing significantly high counselor caseloads, where you might have one counselor serving multiple schools. You have counselors that are splitting their time between direct student support and substantial administrative tasks, which can limit their ability to provide that individualized guidance. Rural jurisdictions are facing additional issues related to transportation barriers and limited local industry diversity, which narrows work-based learning options. And students sometimes are receiving only group-based services and not getting the one-on-one or individualized support that is desired given these capacity constraints. And while we know this is not unique at all to career counseling, definitely a challenge to be overcome and provide best practice. So in addition to naming things that are working and challenges, our group also shared ideas and opportunities to be considered, both for the state to consider things that they think that they should be thinking about across the board as local jurisdictions. And then they also were very specific about things that the LEAs, the workforce boards and community colleges and career counselors should be thinking about. They were intentional in thinking about whether something could happen more immediately, whether it was a more persistent need or whether it would take longer to build the infrastructure to support it. So we thought it was important to name those things as well. So on the next slide, and I know that it's hard to read these things, so hopefully you have a copy in front of you that you're able to see more clearly, but I'll just kind of elevate different things. The local workforce board development boards emphasize the need for statewide best practice sharing mechanisms, clear state guidance on partnership structure and roles, support for staffing and funding capacity, and improved outcome measurement tools and definitions. The LEA specifically called for reciprocal data sharing, not just sending data up to be reviewed, but also receiving usable information back. They requested clear and early guidance on metrics and expectations, and support for embedding career counseling models and professional development for the counselors. The community colleges want better integration with the K-12 and workforce partners, LEAs and the workforce partner, and clarity on their role in the local structure, data systems that support coordination, and consistent approaches to measuring outcomes. The career counselors themselves are asking for more robust onboarding, ongoing high-quality professional development, tools to engage students more effectively, and clarity on metrics and outcome expectations for their work. At the state level, what they wanted to focus on in the short term is asking the state to provide clear, early, and consistent guidance on metrics and reporting requirements. and definitions. For example, what counts as career ready or individualized counseling. They also want the state to establish and communicate standards for quality while preserving local flexibility. Another short-term need that they named is statewide communication and learning mechanisms. Things like newsletters, conferences, communities of practice, so they can learn from one another rather than reinventing solutions in isolation. In the midterm, they asked for standardized training and professional development on data sharing and use, collective impact practices, school operations and culture, graduation requirements, partnership roles and responsibilities. In the long term, they want to see integrated data sharing systems with clear compliance guidance, data governance standards, and the ability to track students' evolving career interests over time and across jurisdictions. For local level, what they're looking at for the short term is that they can implement more of the tiered professional development onboarding locally, accounting for varying staff experience, addressing turnover through robust onboarding, and creating ongoing learning and peer networks among the counselors. So they're taking ownership and recognizing that's something they can do at the local level with support. In the midterm, formalizing two-way data sharing, clearly defined data elements and lawful uses, and regular actionable reporting back to all contributors. And in the long term, expanding community and employer engagement through collaborative events and initiatives, clear timelines, shared responsibilities, and feedback loops. They want more coordinated work on events like the career fairs and the industry experiences across the agencies to avoid duplication and maximize access. Lastly, to go back to the big picture, Maryland has been implementing this model since 2023. You've moved from planning to implementation into building out a collaborative career counseling model. Your local partners are demonstrating scalable innovations and through those solutions we've highlighted today, while also identifying challenges that require more coordinated state and local action. The key opportunities to focus on to strengthen your impact, clarifying roles across the LEAs, workforce development boards, and community colleges. Providing early, consistent guidance on metrics and expectations. Reducing turnover, standardizing career counselor onboarding, enabling reciprocal data sharing, and building local capacity through professional development. Thank you all for the opportunity to share this data. Love to take this time and open up if there's other questions.
I have a couple, just one thing that's going through my mind. I know, and maybe this exists, but I'm wondering if, so we have, you know, in each jurisdiction and in the schools, you know, career coaches are embedded, et cetera. Is there a notion of like a hub and spoke kind of model that could support some of this in a more intentional way where there is, I'm thinking of a couple of needs that I could foresee. One is industry expertise, like you simply are not going to have all of the various industry expertise, you know, in any one individual career counselor. That's not, you can't recruit. I mean, that would not be the way I would think about recruiting, because you want students to be exposed to all kinds. So one is there, so is there some hub resources that's like bringing that real industry expertise, right? And it's available to all the jurisdictions. And then with that, also that how model that could help with the like dissemination of these best practices. We're putting frameworks in place that it's like, here's how you run the bi-weekly meetings. Here's how you know, again, not meddling with local autonomy, but providing that as like technical assistance, basically. Like this is what works. And in terms of two-way data sharing, it's so I see this all the time. It's so easy to get paralyzed because you're like, I don't have all the data systems. You can't wait till you have all the data systems to start sharing whatever data you have. So in those you know, bi-weekly meetings, like, okay, where are we going to start? This is what we need to know from the school, and here's what we need to know from the local workforce board, and you know, like we shouldn't let perfect get in the way of good. And then this is just a question that I have about, and then I'll stop. It's all related, so then you guys speak. With this hub and spoke idea, isn't that kind of what we saw in like the Swiss model, et cetera, where they're actually, I mean, I know that this is a much bigger infrastructure, so I'm not saying that we can have standalone buildings that students come to. That's, I think, if I understand correctly, that's what happens there. But is there a way to mimic that type of being able to tap into that level of, you know, those are my thoughts. Curious what other people.
Yeah. I'll just name, one that I know that the state partners have created a website, that's housed through MSDE that does provide some information and is intended to kind of be that informational hub. And then there are models across the country that have done similar versions of what you're describing in terms of like a local resource center that students have access to. So there's certainly ways to explore that further and see where there's best practice.
I think on that point, I'd be interested in exploring what the role of the local workforce boards can be in that, given the role that they already have with the coaches and the idea that they hopefully are putting some of that industry expertise connection point as part of their role. Are they one element of regional hubs or some components of the industry expertise? Maybe even some of the, you know, because many of them work across multiple school jurisdictions with their career coaching program. So maybe that's a place to start, or thinking about their membership association, in addition, and in partnership, like they already are working with MSDE on some professional development components.
Well, and does, maybe my MSDE colleagues does MSD offer, I mean, I imagine you must, like, professional development for teachers, for example, and is that, you know, is there a hub and spoke model there, or of course there are things that are happening at the school level, but then, you know.
Madam Chair, I would like to share a little bit more about MSDE's career counseling, professional development that Rita Bordunas has developed. There is a website and a hub for resources. They're being collected there. We also, with our second year with GFF, the technical assistance and some of the recommendations that have been mentioned here will be considered for state level technical assistance to support local jurisdictions, but then also, lastly, MSD also hosts monthly career counseling, professional development. I believe they're about 2 hours on Thursdays. There's an opportunity for you all to join as well if you're interested, but it's specific to the LEAs, and there are different topics every month to just support them in this work. And with GFF, we do have a bi-weekly meeting where we discuss next steps, developing that career counseling framework that we had started a couple of weeks ago, and then expanding that to the technical assistance. So some things are in place, and then Shauna, we could take back the idea of the spokes and ways to expand career counseling and support the locals.
This is a really challenging thing to take on, and I know there's been a lot of work done. It feels like from this report, it's really helpful to get like the honest feedback from the stakeholders in the field. I asked, because of course I'm a parent of 2 teenagers, and that person, as you all know, relentlessly goes into the internship coordinator, and I go to the apprenticeship fairs. They say they're going to have apprenticeships at colleges. They only have colleges, and but I do think that part of the difficulty is like we're sort of trying to boil the ocean at this point about metrics. Like we, you know, every kid is going to need a different kind of counseling about their career, but clearly one counselor cannot provide that for every child. So like, what is the focus, right? And where should we really be telling people to focus? And like, it's a limited toolkit, right? Like, do these 5 of 7 best practices. Some of them will fit your high school, some of them won't. But it also strikes me that we are simply not, and again, this is limited to our, you know, Montgomery High School parent experience, but even the existing tools that are there that could have could be leveraged much better to provide information to parents and students are not well used outside of, you know, college advising, right? It's very difficult for people to do that. I happen to have a daughter who has, like, from her interest thing, whenever she did it, like agricultural equipment operator, air traffic controller, like these are very in-demand fields. There's no follow-up, right? That's been in her portfolio for 2 years. There's absolutely no follow-up of like, hey, here's a student, we have needs in these areas. It just doesn't happen. And I don't know how to create more systems that would help career counselors with that too, right? Because they can't be chasing down, a class of literally 600 or 700 kids a year, right? Because that's what all the high schools are like in Montgomery County. You can't chase down each one of those kids. It's impossible. So they have to have sort of better tools at their fingertips.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I think their call for more coordinated peer networks comes into play, to be able to learn from each other, see what they can take and adapt and apply in their setting. But I think also looking, I think the hub idea around, and using the website that has been created creates opportunity to share information as well. But that consistent conversation, especially in the early stages of implementation, is critical so that they can be learning and building and growing and innovating.
And the only way you scale is to figure out what are those systems. Like, it can't be cognitive load
Right.
on the career counselor to think about, of the 1,500 students that I'm responsible for, did I follow up with the kid that has we have to figure out what those systems are. And I think that's often more effective at a hub level than a spoke level. Because you're gonna make investments in systems, it's gotta meet everybody's needs.
Absolutely. And I know in one of our meetings, we talked about the importance of the student experience not being so different. They may move from Prince George's County to Howard County, and their experience shouldn't be so vastly different that then they're behind or trying to play catch up. And so how do you ensure that there is some equity across as you're looking at broadly?
I think some of this also makes me think, looking at the draft report and listening to this conversation, thinking about how we take some feedback back and maybe get a little more specific with some of the recommendations. One thing I was also looking at is specificity across some of the recommendations, which I think are in a lot of really good directions relevant to this feedback. Even something like the data sharing piece. Well, okay, at the state level, who needs to do what? Where does that live? What's the policy or the regulatory issue? Who needs to change that? And how, starting to really dig in there, kind of among our immediate next steps, we can bring some of this back to the committee. And I actually had also a question that I kind of wanted to throw in the mix too. You were talking about some of the embedded coaches and a lot of positives around them being embedded in the schools and in the school culture. At the same time, I'm thinking back to some expert review team visits that I participated in over the last year. And coaches were talking about some positives to that and also some drawbacks, talking about, I don't spend as much time in front of students because I'm helping run the car pickup and drop off line and stuff like that, because they become such a part of the school. Which, I'm sure does come with positives, but also, of course, well, that's not how we want them spending their particular time. Did that come up? It sounds like it came up in
It definitely did. And someone who's worked with school counselors for a long time, it always comes up.
Yeah.
But with the career counselors, it definitely did come up as you have to really honor their role and what they're in the building to do, and not to overwhelm them with the other tasks of running the school.
Yeah, so maybe when we're thinking about state framework that comes out of this, for those roles and what they look like, and professional development, job descriptions, we're making some of that really clear for all the stakeholders involved in kind of co-managing these individuals. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I hate to cut off the discussion, but we have to get through her. And so thank you so much. Yeah,
Thank you.
okay, so now we're going to transition to walk through our proposed annual report. And that over. Rachel.
Great, thank you. And I'll just get us started before Team Chair, but thank you, Chair Norton. In thinking about our annual report, we're bringing this one before the committee for some substantive discussion of some of the trends, findings, and potential next steps raised in the annual report. Kind of level set. The reason this is important is because, some annual reports are a little bit more just, here's what we did. Some activities we engaged in this year. As we build out the committee's work with portfolio policy, its expert review team and data, gathering and tracking mechanisms, this report is increasingly becoming what it's really meant to be under statute. Under statute, in the blueprint, we are asked to report to the governor, the General Assembly, and the Accountability and Implementation Board every December 1st to really show exactly how the CTE system is doing on its blueprint goals, surface challenges, barriers, as well as some highlights, and really also get into recommendations. This year, we've taken steps really in that direction, and specifically, we wanted to make sure that we were able to better leverage data this year now that we are, a couple of years down the road into implementation. And so we did make the call and receive approval from the AIB to submit this report on February 1st as a deadline, so that we had time to get information from MSDE on CTE system participation, and some data points related to things like industry recognized credentials. So we could really start talking meaningfully about that baseline that we've been gathering over this last year or so. This report I know is of great interest at the last committee meeting to also talk about what are we learning from the ERTs? What are we hearing on the ground the most from those expert review team visits? And so we wanted to also take some time before asking the committee to vote on sending this annual report as a representation of your collective work up to the governor and the General Assembly and the AIB. Talk about what some of these highlights look like and some of these findings and trends are looking like, and get your kind of thoughts and feedback on that. Yeah, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Rachel. So we began our annual report with an overview of what the committee has accomplished in the last year. So in 2025, the CTE Committee worked with MSDE, Maryland Department of Labor, and the AIB, the Accountability Implementation Board, to finalize the foundational policy architecture necessary to operationalize the blueprints goals around CTE. Specifically, our key accomplishments included adoption of the Maryland CTE framework, which aligns academic instruction, career preparation, and employer engagement across secondary and post-secondary systems. Next, as we discussed today, we implemented a statewide industry recognized credential policy this year and an apprenticeship policy establishing consistent quality standards and minimum requirements for what counts towards the 45% goal. And the 45% goal, as discussed in our last meeting in December, approval of the CTE joint vision statement, aligning with the AIB, State Board of Education, and the CTE Committee around a shared definition of success and further clarifying the 45% goal for our high school graduates. And this new goal is who meets the college and career readiness CCR standards, as well as specifying that within the goal, 1 in 4 of these graduates will complete the high school level of a registered apprenticeship. So this year's report combines state agency data with firsthand feedback from the CTE expert review teams. Even though there are some data limitations, which are explained within the report, this also gives us a very solid look at the current state of CTE in Maryland. Key insights and patterns we've detected based on this data include IRC gaps. There are disparities in attainment of IRCs, so we will need to focus efforts on that. With focus efforts on the IRCs by uplifting best practices to address the equity gap. Credential progress. The good news is the number of seniors meeting or the number of seniors earning an IRC went up last school year, which means more students are getting into credential earning programs. However, we do have to note that the current approved IRC list does not go into effect until July 1st of this year. So it would be possible to see a potential dip next year. Also, there's a CTE participation swing. We're seeing a lot of variations in who's participating in and finishing CTE programs across different LEAs. And smaller and medium districts have higher involvement than the larger districts. And our apprenticeship numbers are up because apprenticeship is the gold standard. So both employers and students are showing growing interest in our registered apprenticeship programs. However, these numbers are still in the very early stages.
One thing, I can't help myself, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. With the joint vision statement, we wanted to have a specific goal for registered apprenticeships by the 2030-2031 school year. But the intention is for that to steadily increase. We want to see that, over time, there are more and more students completing registered apprenticeships as the gold standard. So I have to keep reminding us of that North Star.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this table provides a quick snapshot of our progress toward that 45% goal for the school year 2023-2024 and school year 2024-2025. But there are a couple of different details we should touch on related to this area. First, the current Maryland labor database doesn't specifically tag whether an apprentice is in high school, nor does it track their specific training hours. Because of these data limitations, we work with the Maryland Labor Office of Apprenticeships team to identify a reliable proxy metric. We are tracking 17-year-olds who register for apprenticeships in 2024. This group represents the students most likely to be graduating seniors who have completed the required 250 hours of on-the-job training and 144 hours of instruction. Based on this metric, we have approximately 99 students meeting the goal for this school year. It is a practical way for us to measure success while our data systems continue to evolve. Second, the CTE Committee's apprenticeship and IRC policies were issued in December 2024, which means LEAs in Maryland did not have the opportunity to adopt and implement these policies in school year 24-25. The IRC policy published in December 2024 presented a new list of approved IRCs that did not go into effect until the current school year 2025-2026. And for this reason, the following data on IRC completion rates is associated with the list associated with the technical skills assessments and IRCs approved prior to December 2024, not the most recent list of approved IRCs.
It's basically what was in effect when students were going through this, which is the right way to measure this. So whatever the policy was at that time. And I bet the next thing you're gonna say is that we probably will see a dip in 25-26 because we've just dramatically shrunk the number of approved IRCs.
That is correct, Madam Chair. And the last and most important context for our number of graduates listed here, as you all know, in November and December of 2025, this committee, the Accountability Implementation Board and the Maryland State Board of Education approved that CTE joint visioning statement that refines our approach to the 45% goal. This updated vision changes the denominator for our metrics from 45% of all graduating high school students to 45% of graduating students who are college and career ready. So within that framework, the joint vision sets a specific target for registered apprenticeships, aiming for the 1 in 4 of those CCR students, that's college and career ready students, to complete the high school level of an apprenticeship by 2031. Madam Chair, you just mentioned that.
Sorry,
No,
got ahead of you.
No, I was just, seconding, because you're absolutely right. And because of this new vision that was approved midway through the current school year of 2025-2026, the annual report continues to use the original denominator of all high school graduates for that 2024-2025 data. Future reports will be adjusted to reflect the change in the data gathering, focusing exclusively on the graduating CCR student population. So now I'd like to touch on the sections of the annual report that covers the expert review team visits, which this committee has shown interest in based on our last meeting. As most of you are already aware, over the past school year, our expert review teams has been on the ground gathering the insights we need to truly understand the current state of CTE across our schools. During the 2024-2025 school year, the ERT visited 11 LEAs and 18 different schools to conduct a comprehensive review of our programs. These visits enabled the committee to go beyond surface level metrics by reviewing self-reported data, classroom observations, and focus groups and interviews with a wide range of stakeholders, including teachers, career coaches, students, school counselors, and LEA leadership. When we include the pilot year from 2023-2024 and the visits conducted so far this year, our total reach now stands at 17 LEAs and 30 schools visited to date. You can see the full group of visits throughout the state reflected on the map on the slide here. The process is yielding high valid data because we use standardized objectives and peer-to-peer review. Our team, which averaged 10 diverse experts, are successfully identifying equity gaps for underserved students and fostering a unique level of collaboration. In fact, the participant feedback was so positive that many experts have requested to join additional visits. However, we are navigating two primarily operational challenges on the staffing side. While we've added 3 key roles last year, the departure of our CTE ERT manager in July combined with the state hiring freeze has delayed our post-visit reports. The good news is we just received our hiring freeze exemption to fill that CTE ERT expert review team role. Additionally, the current data collection process is too arduous for our LEA partners. We are pivoting to a pre-filled model where schools provide the data from where we provide the data from MSDE to the LEAs, which will significantly reduce administrative burden for the LEAs. And that'll be implemented moving forward. We kind of started that this school year, 25-26. Our goals remains to streamline a collaborative process that supports both our staff and our schools. Right slide?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry. I warned you quickly.
Oh, no, it's okay. Now I'd like to provide you all with a quick look at what we're seeing in districts across the state and what it's telling us about the state of CTE in Maryland. We've seen the regional collaboration matters. We noticed that neighboring districts sharing the same labor market tend to show very similar performance patterns. This tells us there's a massive opportunity to move from siloed efforts and toward a more unified regional strategic approach. Local innovation is strong. Our teams found some incredible creative work happening at the district level, especially around work-based learning and employer engagement. These local successes shouldn't stay local. We want to use them to inform our statewide best practices. LEA capacity also varies. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, as you heard in some of our previous reports, varying between urban LEAs, rural LEAs, as well as LEAs along the 95 corridor, Western Maryland. It varies based on each region. So the LEA capacity does vary. Larger districts are struggling with the sheer scale of coordination, while smaller districts often lack the staff to keep up. Finally, a persistent challenge is the data systems, and that remains a constraint. Because of varying definitions and reporting timelines across agencies, we can't fully measure our progress toward the blueprint implementation. Bridging those data gaps remains a top priority for us, and we've discussed a few ways we are working on that in our presentation today throughout this annual report. So we're gonna, it's a hefty slide, but we're gonna talk about some of the strengths and examples of best practices we've seen across the state. I'll let you look over the specific district highlights rather than reading them to you. But I want to point out that our districts are working creatively and being responsive to local workforce and CTE needs. So this slide here highlights 4 primary challenges identified during our visits. That's the next slide. First, to address oversubscribed programs. Wacomico County launched Twilight CTE, allowing waitlist students to earn industry recognized certifications, industry certifications after hours.
Let me ask a follow-up, because I wasn't familiar with that one actually, which might be silly. That's really, it's for something like that, it reminds me of some things I did hear on some of your I went on. How do they work that out with teachers and instructors, or do we have? I don't know, maybe I'm asking a team member to jump in on that too, I don't know, but, how are they kind of making that work on the after hours piece? Is that at the school with regular instructors? Is it pulling other partners in?
Yeah, so Wacomico County Public Schools has the evening high school, and they integrated the CTE, taught the Twilight CTE into the evening high school. So it's something that was already pre-built and established for their particular population. And they wanted to specifically serve minority majority populations because that's who they serve in Wacomico. And they thought that evening high school and integrating it with the CTE, Twilight CTE was a great idea.
Nice, it's really cool. Thank you, Jason. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and also to expand registered apprenticeships, Somerset County has updated their policy to let students leave school early for the on-the-job training. The practical experience needed for some of these industries that are in high demand.
Both of those seem like great examples of letting the, employer needs drive the student schedule or the, like prioritizing work. So.
I agree. Now, one of our challenges, as you all are all aware, regarding the transportation hurdles. So Caroline County successfully used carryover funds to purchase a dedicated passenger van for student coaching activities. And then finally, to better serve special populations, Cecil County's Student Transition and Employability Program is providing modified instruction to ensure students with disabilities are career ready. These examples prove that while the barriers are real, there are potential to replicate and scale and use these as solutions across the state for LEAs who may be having similar challenges. And I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel to close us out on that.
Thank you. Before I do that and talk a little bit about what's next coming out of some of this work, I know we had some dialogue on that. Thought I'd see if anyone wants to jump in with any other questions or reflections on what you've heard so far. Anything really like especially interesting or exciting or surprising. I know we have some members online who've been quiet so far, and we certainly welcome you all to chime in as well.
Well, look, I think it's really important to celebrate progress. Spend a lot of time talking about how hard this is and what we can't do and all that stuff. And whatever the caveats are, the numbers are moving in the right direction, right? And so I think we need to acknowledge that progress is.
Thank you. And I do think these examples highlight some great examples of the types of innovations happening out there in response to and in support of a lot of the goals we've been working on, which is really exciting to see. Oh, happy slide. Yeah, back to happy slide.
Happy slide.
Thank you. Well, as we kind of, go ahead, I'm sorry. Yes, of
I
course.
think what would be helpful, first of all, really appreciate the report and the detail here. Since we started a lot of this work, even in the last year, like the changes that have happened at the federal level with this landscape, I don't know that we were able to think about them in this legislative session, and there are a lot of things going on. We still have our structural deficits, we have all the challenges, still trying to implement the blueprint, but it does feel like it's a moment where we say, okay, we have a lot of constraints. But the good news is, especially on CTE, we have massive demand. Like this is like parents and students like desperately want more of this programming. I think you could pick any superintendent or any high school principal, and they would also say, yes, I would love to get my students into more experiential learning, especially senior year, because I know kids are sick of sitting in the classroom. Like they want to do other things. Like so everyone wants to do it. The challenge is just finding the resources and like what are the right flexibilities. And as things workforce develop, all these things start changing in the world, I think that we do need to sort of challenge ourselves like how do we take these observations and translate them into some actionable policies. And I know our MSD colleagues have many things on their plates. And so that's one of the many things you have to think about, but I do want to think about how we as the committee can help support that, because it does feel like maybe there's potentially some opportunities in the next year or two.
definitely, I was thinking that, like, the capacity constraints, okay, if we're trying to get more registered apprenticeships. There were a number where there is demand, and just not enough space, teachers, whatever. That feels like, I mean, I don't know, I see something like that, I'm like, okay, we should focus on solving that problem because all the ingredients are there. So how do we do that? And it sounds like the evening high school is a solution in one place. I know that may not work in other places, but like, what are the?
Yeah. I think it's actually a perfect segue into some of like just kind of previewing for the committee and for our audience, what's coming next on this. And coming out of the annual report, we didn't go all the way to some of this level of detail because of work that is ongoing to develop out of that joint vision statement across this committee, the State Board of Education, and the AIB. Next is developing that joint implementation plan. And our team has already started some work on drafting, using conversations and things we've already talked about with partners, using some of these observations. And I think the work between now and this committee's April meeting, where we will go in depth on that plan and on very specific annual targets to build to that new 2030-31 target, and then increase, as you pointed out, Chair Norton, beyond that. That's a real chance to pick the problems that we're going to focus on and decide who's going to focus on which ones and how. Is it MSD looking at a regulatory barrier around data systems? I'm saying that as an example. I actually don't know if that's a good example. Is it us looking at a legislative proposal for 2027 on what you just named, or other things, kind of being able to say, okay, this is what's needed for implementation moving forward. Which problems are we going to pick to focus on solving first and then maybe focus on solving second? I think it's a perfect opportunity to really break that down. Leveraging some of these observations and examples and things we might want to try to scale. I think it also will pair really nicely with the next round of partnership with MSD on the Perkins Reserve grants. Last year, we issued those to a number of districts in partnership to expand registered apprenticeship opportunities. They didn't take us up on opportunities to address barriers like transportation. That's really hard. So I think we also have an opportunity in the next few months with that implementation plan. What problems are we solving, and what can we maybe start to try to pilot some even small scale solutions around all together? I think I guess that'd be how I'd summarize a preview of like maybe our April kind of theme for our time together, and some work we'll be asking committee members to engage on with our staff and our partners in between. That joint implementation plan, of course, will also be, again, it's joint. So it's in partnership with the school board and the AIB, because there is going to be partnership at that level and alignment required to tackle these problems together. We certainly can't do them all alone.
And I just want to say on this, I think this is really important. Part of our responsibility as a committee is to set annual targets towards that 45%. Well, and I'm just thinking now, the conversation we had today with DFF about best practices, what was the best practice? Bring all the parties together, have standing meetings, have shared data exchange. We have to do that. That's what we have to do here. And so we're not going to develop those targets in isolation. We're going to do that together as part of this joint implementation plan. And that means that the targets will have teeth, if you will, because it's not just here's the target, it's okay, who's doing what to get to this in this year, and who's doing what to get here. I think that has a lot more, we're gonna make a lot more progress.
That's very well said, very well said. Actually, don't know if I have anything else to add as we close out this piece on the annual report. Certainly would welcome any additional discussion, reflections on things that are really interesting or surprising, questions before Chair Norton calls for a motion. These are some of our suggested questions, but we've already touched on some of these so far. But
any questions?
So I'm kind of paying attention, but I'm multitasking here. So, and this Zoom, I didn't know how to raise hand here. Excellent work, great progress. I want you to know this is difficult work. So very, very pleased to see the progress. I wanted to speak a little bit about career counseling. The importance of career counseling can never be understated. This is probably one of the key areas for community colleges and also for K through 12. The importance of people who come from industries to talk to students and do career counseling is also important in addition to folks who I understand are professional career counselors. So in my experience at the ground level, when we had an engineering faculty advising students in the engineering program, that made a difference, right? If you want to be an engineer, let's talk to an engineer as quickly as possible. Some of the examples students will start in some of these programs. Well, I'm not doing well in calculus. It's so difficult, right? You go to a general counselor who doesn't have a similar experience, you say, oh my God, you're having problem in calculus. That's a prerequisite in 5 different areas. Maybe you should change your major. But if you go to an engineer, a counselor or faculty who comes from a similar field, so yes, I did calculus and I also found it very difficult. Let's talk about what your problems are. How can we find you some support so you get through some of these fundamental classes? So the point is bringing people from those careers in which we want the students to seek some of these opportunities. And this is where I think an enhanced partnership with industry could be very, very helpful. But again, thank you for wonderful work here.
3 more. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? If not, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the CTE Committee's 2025 annual report to be submitted to all the various.
So moved. So moved.
And have a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes and we will submit this to the AIB, General Assembly Governor's Office on, I believe, February 1st. I have that. Great. Okay, so we sort of talked through next steps, just a reminder to everybody. We'd love suggestions for our 2026 meeting locations. So you can send an email to that email address with suggestions. You want that for hosting, let us know. Here are the dates of both the Governor's Workforce Development Board meetings and our CTE committee meetings. So more info will be coming via a calendar invite. Anything else that we need to cover? Did we get it all? Okay. Our next meeting is going to be in April. And just a reminder that we are going to, between now and then, this work is already underway. We are very much working with our partners on this joint implementation plan. So committee members will be in touch for your input and feedback and help with that. And we'll be reviewing, the plan is to review that and for approval in our April meetings. Can I have a motion to adjourn? I lost. Okay. Now, just a question. They've been schooling me on Robert. Motion to adjourn. Do I have to have a full vote on that?
No.
Seriously, we're gonna all learn. This is about workplace learning. Is that true? Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay.